Hi, Philly, and welcome. Today we're starting chapter 5 of the Gospel of John. We're going to be going through verses 1 through 3, including this little bit of 3 that only appears in some of the sources. I thought it'd be fun to include that. It's a lot to go through today. Here's our rubric, everything we look for as we go through the text. Let's get started. Metataute ein heorte ton Judaion kai anabe Iesus es hierosolume, that's hard to say, estin de entois hierosolumois epitei probatike columbe thra he epilegomene hebraisti bethzatha pentastoas accusa en tautais kata keto plethos ton asthenun ton tuflon kolon zeron ek decomenon tein tu hudatos knesin. And there we have that. Our very first thing is a prepositional phrase. I think we've seen this specific setup before. This is just going to be referring back to chapter 4. After these things, meta plus the accusative. Then we got plural and the neuter demonstrative. Meta plus accusative showing us time when. Ein from eimi, this is going to be our third person singular imperfect tense active and indicative, with heorte, not heorta, with that eta as our subject, nominative singular feminine. So after these things, I'm going to write down the translation. So I don't know which specific feast that John is talking about here. If I was paying better attention to the timeline, I could probably tell you, but there are a number of them. Then we have ton Judaion omega nu there with article and in this word. Is this a noun or an adjective? Judaios, Judaya. I think it's an adjective acting substantively. It's like the Jewish. But this is going to be a genitive plural, so feast of the Jews. We could even say that this might be referring to the Jewish religion, of which Jesus was a part. So the distinction would only be something necessary to be made for Greek readers. Kai anabe. I should have done that before writing all that down. This is going to be masculine generic, though really masculine referring to the scribes, Pharisees, and the men. So they were the primary actors in pretty much every aspect of the religion. Anabe, this comes from anabino. We've got that epsilon right there, which tells us it's a past tense. This is bain, base, bay, the aorist form. So that's a third singular aorist active indicative with Jesus as our subject. And then es Hierosolume, prepositional phrase, place where, accusative. That's what ace takes. And then this is plural, neuter, and form. All right, so there's verse 1. Moving on in verse 2, we have our verb of being at the very beginning, which means this is probably telling us it's a declarative verb. It's pointing out, so we would translate there is. Estin is going to be our third person singular, present tense, active, and indicative. The movable nu included, because we don't have a vowel or a specific type of consonant, not that I can remember the type of consonant, following after it. En prepositional phrase, tois Hierosolumois, is going to be plus dative. We can tell from the omega iota sigma, plural ending right there. And then neuter as well as above. Epi, prepositional phrase, that sub iota right there on the article and on our verb here tell us that, again, this is taking a dative case. Columbethra is the wrong form, so this prepositional phrase is going to have to close here. This is singular, and then the article tells us that this is feminine. Columbethra, this is a first declension. Really mixing up my nouns and my verbs today, apparently. This is a first declension noun, which then tells us that this alpha here has to be the nominative form, singular and feminine. How do we know feminine? Well, if we take a look ahead, we got he epilegomene. We got that eta right there and this article right here, both of which are feminine. And this is from epilogo. Not logeo. Logeo is not a thing. But we have a participial form off the present stem of the verb. It's an adjective. It needs to modify something. And then we've got kolumbetra, which is first declension itself. There are very few first declensions that are masculine. And almost always, to the point where I can't think of a single time where it's not the case, the nominative singular, the first declension in masculine, is eta sigma. But we've got an alpha right here, so feminine. And then for this participle, since we've got the men right there off of a verb that we know is active in voice and form, the men tells us that we have either a passive or a deponent. So we've got going on is, there is in Jerusalem, at rather than on, but at, what probatica means, which I'll get to in a minute. We have a kolumbetra, and kolumbetra is a pool, or we've got the verb kolumbeo, something like that, which means like to swim. Not dog paddle, but actually swim. And then epilogomene, we would normally use this for naming, a saying on, so placing a name on. And then we have this followed here by hibraisti. The alpha and iota are pronounced separately, we know, because of the two dots right there. This iota ending on here tells us that this is an adverbial word, and it just means in the Hebrew language. And then we have the name connected to kolumbetra by epilegomene. And this word doesn't decline. And I also don't know what it means. I'm going to write all that translation down in a moment. Probatike, so you should immediately recognize that there's something to do with sheep or shepherd in this. Probaton is that's the sheep because that's the neuter form. And then when we have this ending added on, ike, that apparently makes a word translate as related to what the noun is. So at the related to sheep, which I think most Bibles translate as at the sheep gate, because there was a gate called the sheep gate. But I'm going to probably write that down. Yeah. And the other option. Join you again shortly. Okay. So far, so good. Bethzatha, you have probably seen in your Bible called Bethesda at times. That's a variant reading of it, and the Greek for that, I'll write it above it. First, indeclinable. The Greek is... there's supposed to be an epsilon there. There we go. And I think the accent is acute right there, which would, of course, become a grave. Hebraisti could be referring to Hebrew as the language or Aramaic as the language. I don't think they have a separate word for the two of them. Aramaic was more of the common tongue among the people, and Hebrew was the liturgical language. That you would read the Old Testament scriptures, though at that time the only scriptures available in Hebrew. It would be a form of chant, which I will not try to reproduce for you here. You don't need that sort of pain. But they are like different dialects from each other. You could think Brooklyn English versus Kentish English versus Scottish English versus far Southern American English, and so on and so forth. The separation there is, I think, comparable. I don't know much about Aramaic at all. I know enough Hebrew to stumble along, so I can't say much more than that. For John, both Hebrew and Aramaic word forms pop up all across the book, so you can't really be sure, without him actually putting in a word like Bethzatha, which one is intended. And as I said, I don't know what Bethzatha means. I've got it written down somewhere. I saw there will probably be a note underneath the video. I'm probably not in the video, explaining if I'm able to figure it out or if I had figured it out previously. But there we have that. Let's move on. Pente, we have another indeclinable word. This just means 5. Stoas, we have alpha sigma there for the accusative, plural, and this is feminine, stoa, stoa. I'm only going Latin. Stoa, stoas. There we go. Ekusa, we have our omicron, upsilon ending right there with the sigma, which we should know is our present participle addition for the feminine form, since we've got columbetra, feminine. We need the feminine participial forms. Other would be, I think, ekon. Alpha right there just tells us nominative. And I should probably have said what a stoa is. A stoa is a column or a portico of some variety. So this sheep gate area just has 5 pillars. Or it is possible that it has 5 porticos running around it. There has been archaeological work done, so there's probably an answer out there which of the two it is, and I'm afraid I don't know. Maybe it was just a single portico with 5 pillars. But moving on, I'm going to write that down and we'll continue. All right, in prepositional phrase, tais, so that's taking the dative, and it is plural and feminine. Tais is going to be tau tais is going to be referring back to stoa, since we have a feminine plural right there. Kata keito, epsilon iota tau omicron. This is going to be from kata keimai, epsilon iota mu alpha iota is the last 5 letters of that word. So we have a deponent. Yeah, we have a deponent because the first principal part ends in mu alpha iota. So this eto is going to be a third person singular imperfect tense because of the epsilon right there. And we have the to ending. So we got mai sai tai for the present tense, and it would be main so to for the imperfect tense endings. Of course, I could be mixing up Attic Greek in there. Sorry. But imperfect, deponent, indicative, and this just means lying. So amongst them, in the stoas, was lying plethos, omicron, sigma right there for nominative, singular, masculine. It's an adjective, but it is acting as, or is it an adjective? Plethos, pletha. Well, looking up at my notes, I don't say adjective specifically, so I don't remember on this. The word itself means multitude, or a plethora, the word from which we get it. The word which we get from it, sorry. But with that meaning, multitude is not normally a noun in languages, so I think adjective is correct. But we've just got the masculine form because it's masculine generic. If you have one man amongst the crowd, masculine is the form that you would normally use. But then we've got the possessor of this tone, astenun tone. We've seen this word before. We've got omega nu there for our genitive plural ending. It's going to be masculine again. Omicron, upsilon, nu, tau is going to be the addition to it to make it the present participle. And this is an eo, epsilon iota contract verb, which is why we have omicron, upsilon there. Should just be omicron, nu, tau for that participial ending. Present tense, asten, stem. Active, of course, and participle, as already said. This word means being sick. And then we've got even more possessives. Tuflon, omicron, nu, again, so same genitive. But this time we don't have a participle. This one means blind. Colon, another possessive. This one means crippled or lame. Again, not in the 90s sense. And then we've got zeron, omicron nu for the almost final time without these with these brackets. And this one means dry, but we normally translate it as paralyzed. I don't really understand why dry and paralyzed are the same thing. Maybe it's like the legs wither up, so it looks like the legs or the arms or the parts of the body are drying up. So maybe that's how they described paralyzation. Well, we have all that, so before we get into this not in every text line, I'm going to go ahead and write down the translation. In those porticos was lying a multitude of all of these. All right, so far so good with that. komenon. We've got omoniga linking this with all of these adjectives, substantive adjectives. Here, men as our participial addition, telling us that this is going to be either passive or it's going to be a middle, except that we have ekdekomai as our verb, which then is a deponent. So, genitive, plural, masculine, present stem, deponent, indicative. And this means, well, waiting. And then we're going to be waiting for a accusative, which we find with tain and kinesin. Kinesin is the word for motion. So accusative, singular, feminine, and then two hudatos are genitive, singular, neuter, owning the motion. Some nice sandwiching going on in there, so we know exactly what's owning what. So starting off on the next page in verse 4, we get the marginal explanation of why there's motion in the water, right? So the story that I've heard about the text for this is that the scribes needed a explanation for why all these people are waiting around this pool. And there was a legend, possibly recorded in the writings of the scribes, or something like that, the rabbis maybe, that described a thing that was supposed to happen. And we'll get in verse 4 what that was going on. So one scribe added in, they were waiting for the motion of the water. And then another scribe looks in that, well, why was the water moving? Because the previous guy was well aware of the legend, didn't think it was necessary to include it, presumably. And so then the next scribe down the line was like, well, people don't know what that legend is anymore, so we have to pencil it in. And then we get verse 4, which is not in most, I would think, modern English Bibles. But if you go back to the King James Version, I think it is in that, and others of the era soon thereafter. All right, thank you very much for joining me. Let's take a look at this in its own context, and then I will set you free and turn my air conditioner back on. After these things was feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up into Jerusalem. And there is in Jerusalem, at the relating to sheep place, a pool, the one called in Hebrew Bethzatha, or Bethesda, 5 porticos having. In those was lying down multitude of the being sick, blind, lame, paralyzed, brackets, waiting the of the water, motion, close brackets. Sorry for all the drama there. Thank you very much for joining me. Taking a look at this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you have a very good day.